Most retirement advice assumes that you started in your 20s. But what if you're in your 40s? What if you spent the last 20 years building a life, not a retirement fund? Well, then the question isn't how do I retire at 66? The question becomes, can you fit a 40-year wealth building plan into the next 20 years? And I think you can. Take a look at this flow chart, right? This is the standard retirement 3-phase life course. It's education, work, and leisure. So the idea here is that you learn up to the age of around 25, you work between the ages of 25 and 65, and you retire in leisure after 65, 66. Now, this system is great for society because it creates a lot of predictability, right? So governments can plan pensions and healthcare and things of that nature. But built into this system is a huge assumption, right? The assumption that you're going to spend all of your working period, all of your working stage, working towards and planning for retirement for the age of 66, when you get to sit back, enjoy the fruits of your labor, and really now get to spend time with your family and friends and that kind of thing. But in reality, that rarely happens. What's supposed to happen in your 20s and 30s and what actually happens are two different things entirely. Most people spend the time traveling, switching careers, trying and failing, right? The uncomfortable reality is that most people hit 40 with very little planned for retirement. And even if you do everything right, that still doesn't mean everything's going to turn out okay. There was this lady I met recently, a retired lady, who was telling me this story that really made this real for me, at least. Her and her husband started planning their retirement in their 20s, right? They were planning financially, but they also were planning sort of their wish list, right? Of all the things they were going to get to do after they turned 66. Well, long story short, a couple of years just before they were about to retire, they planned their dream cruise. And a month just before they went on that cruise, her husband passed away. This story broke my heart, but it was a great reminder that even if you start young, give away your freedom, delay your dreams, and do everything right, it really doesn't mean it's going to turn out okay. And what this comes down to really is that you don't have to see retirement as a whole life plan. You can see it as a stage. And if it's a stage, it means you can start later and get there faster. You can turn a marathon into a sprint. And the best time to realize this and take action on it is actually in your 40s. Here's a life cycle balance model, a seesaw chart. And here's what you can see. In your 20s and 30s, you're spending your time getting the basics right. You know, you're finding your career, you're maybe building a family, that kind of thing. And so generally what you find is that people have a lot of time, but they don't have a lot of leverage. And then when you hit your 50s, it's completely reversed. Now you've spent the time, you've got experience, you've got networks, maybe you have capital, right? You have a lot of skills acquired. All of these things you can use and leverage. The problem is now you don't have that much time left. You're more time poor. So really where you find the perfect balance is in your 40s because you have a bit of both. You have a lot more skills, networks, capital, experience than you did in your 20s. But you have a lot more time than you did you will do in your 50s. Basically, you can leverage the resources you have and you have the time to benefit from it. So to turn a 40-year marathon into a 20-year sprint, you need a combination of two things. One, you need a high savings rate. So if you save more, you can invest more. And then two, you need a high return rate so that when you invest, you get a higher return and get there faster. But the problem we face is that when you increase your savings rate, you typically lower your standard of living. And the truth is that just most people find that hard to maintain. And generally, when you're growing your money at higher rates, you're taking on higher risk. And that's a scary proposition in your 40s and just probably not a good idea. So what I'm going to show you here is a workaround, a way to jump ahead without affecting your lifestyle too much and without taking on any extra risk. Typically, when people are talking about retirement and savings, then they're talking about a specific age, right? They're saying if you save more and you invest more, then by this age, you can build more wealth. And that's true. So have a look at this example. Let's say you make $100,000 a year and then you save 10%. So that means you live on $90,000 and you save and maybe invest $10,000. Now, if we assume you want to maintain this living standard through retirement, then we can use the 4% rule, right? And basically what that says is however much you live on right now, then you need 25 times that in retirement. So we would do 25 times 90. So that will give us 2.25 million. And at a realistic return of 8%, it will take you 35 years to hit that goal. Now, if we adjust that savings rate and instead of saving 10,000 a year, you save 20,000 a year. And over the same time frame, you would hit 4.7 million. You save more, you invest more, you build more wealth. And that's great for people in their 20s who have 40 years to build this wealth. But what if you're in your 40s already, right? And you're short on time and you want to accelerate your investing so that you can retire at the same time as everyone else? Well, there's a fix for that. Instead of targeting age, you target an amount. And this change takes you from wealth accumulation to wealth acceleration. It takes you from how much more will I have when I get there to just getting there faster. So the same numbers, you make $100,000 a year and you save 10%. But now instead of targeting the time frame of 35 years, we target the goal amount of 2.25 million. So when you make that change, when you increase your savings rate to 20%, well then it's now that the goal amount will stay fixed and it's the time frame that will vary. Based on the same rate of return, this will take you 26 years. That's much faster. But it actually gets better because based on the 4% rule, you need 25 times what your living salary is. And if you save now 20%, then that means you're actually now living on 80,000 a year. So 80,000 times 25 is actually 2 million. So what we do is we lower the goal amount as well. So instead of just running faster to the finish line, we actually bring the finish line closer to us as well. This shows us that by doubling our savings rate and by changing our focus from wealth accumulation to wealth acceleration, we can get there 10 years faster. Now I know what you're going to say here. You're going to say that increasing your savings rate so much and maintaining it is impossible. And the truth is, it is hard. And in fact, there is a massive difference between even increasing your savings rate and then maintaining that rate for an extended period of time. And the reason why that is because most people find that when they increase their savings rate, they actually decrease their lifestyle. And people find it way too hard to live on a low lifestyle for a long period of time. But when you're trying to accelerate time frames so dramatically, then it requires dramatic action. And there's a huge difference between saving and saving strategically. And if you save strategically, this is far more possible. Think about your phone for a second, right? Because the likelihood is that you spend 80% of your screen time on 20% of the same apps. Or your wardrobe. You probably wear 20% of your clothes 80% of the time and often leave the rest to the side. This is the 80-20 rule, which is basically just a rule of thumb that says that 20% of the inputs drive 80% of the outputs. Now, this is a very important rule in finance. You see it everywhere, and including even in the compound interest graph that you tend to see, right? You can see that about 20% of the time frame at the end accounts for 80% of the returns that you get in your portfolio, for example. But how does this apply to your spending? Well, the reality is that 20% of your discretionary spending is what keeps you happy, right? It's the money you spend on travel, having dinner with friends, seeing family, that kind of thing. And the other 80% generally relates to lifestyle creep. It's the upgrades you don't need. It's the subscriptions you don't watch. It's the Amazon purchases that you forgot you bought. The reality is that 80% is waste. It's chasing a tiny, tiny sliver of your happiness. It's the 20% that drives the vast majority of your happiness. So if you can identify the 80% of so-called waste, then you can cut your spending dramatically without barely affecting your standard of living. And more importantly, this will mean that you'll be able to be consistent and sustain it. And that's what's going to drive your wealth. Just like if you deleted 80% of the apps off your phone or you threw away 80% of the clothes you don't use, right? You might notice, but relatively speaking, it's not going to have a very big impact. So consistently maintaining a high savings rate will shorten your time to retirement by 10 years. But what about if you want to get there even faster? Well, that won't come down to what you invest in. It will come down to the order in which you invest. Simply investing in a standard ETF passive fund won't get you there. You have to do something different. People usually think about growing money like this, right? You make money from your active income and then you take a percentage of it and you invest it in passive income. Fine. But you can actually invest in both active and passive. And if you're in your 40s and you're trying to catch up, then you should be investing where you get the highest return on investment. You should be agnostic about where that is. And the highest return on investment comes from this sequence. Active first, passive second. So the same numbers now, right? You make $100,000 a year and you're saving $20,000. But now instead of investing that $20,000 into a standard ETF returning 9%, what you do is you invest it into your earning power, invest it into your skills. So you take that money and you do courses or professional qualifications and certifications. And from that big investment, you'll get a salary bump of around 15%, which is typical for skill acquisition. So now instead of making $100,000 a year, you're making $115,000 a year. Every year, you can now invest $35,000 instead of $20,000 without affecting your lifestyle too much and without taking on any extra risk. You're basically using your pay raise as a cash flow for investing. By simply saving strategically and changing the order in which you invest, you can take 15 years off. You can fast track your retirement. And this doesn't account for other pay raises that you might have throughout your life. It also doesn't account for the fact that you might be starting with some fund already, $50,000 or $100,000 already. Even an average combination of those two things will speed it up by another 5 years. In the end, catching up comes down to just one thing really. It comes down to asymmetry, disproportion. And you need to find the moves, the actions, the decisions that get you there for less.